April 5th, 1531. The sky over London was flat and lifeless, the kind of grey that made the city feel suspended in time. At Smithfield, crowds gathered early, drawn by rumours of an execution unlike any they'd seen before. No scaffold, no axe, just a massive bronze cauldron set over open flames, water already starting to boil. People shifted uneasily. Executions were common, but this felt different, slower, meaner, and no one knew exactly why. If you're into dark history and stories that make your jaw drop, hit subscribe. You'll want more of this. Richard Roose wasn't a nobleman, a soldier, or a criminal by trade. He was a cook, middle-aged, quiet, unremarkable. He worked in the household of Bishop John Fisher, one of the most powerful and outspoken religious figures in England at the time. There was nothing about Roose that stood out. He blended into the background, like most servants in large houses did. He followed orders, prepared meals, and stayed out of the way. There's no record of any prior offense, no sign of trouble. He was, by all accounts, just doing his job. Until one winter afternoon, when a pot of soup changed everything. To understand why a cook's mistake, or crime, would matter so much, you have to look at England in 1531. The country was on edge. King Henry VIII was trying to divorce Catherine of Aragon. He wanted to marry Anne Boleyn, and the Pope wouldn't allow it. The kingdom split in two, those who supported the king's move, and those who saw it as an attack on the church, on marriage, on God himself. Bishop John Fisher was one of the loudest voices against the divorce. He was respected, feared, and deeply religious. But that made him a problem, especially for the Boleyns, who saw him as standing in the way of their rise. Fisher knew he had enemies. He changed bedrooms every night. He was paranoid about his food, and as it turns out, he had reason to be. February 18th, 1531. Bishop Fisher hosted a small lunch at his residence in Lambeth. Nothing grand, just a warm meal on a cold day. On the menu was a thick, hearty soup, common in England at the time. It was prepared by Richard Roose, just like always, but this time, something was different. Roose later claimed he added a powder to the pot, as a joke. A laxative, he said. Something to stir up discomfort, not death. Whether he truly believed that or not, the consequences were immediate and devastating. Fisher barely touched the soup. Maybe he wasn't hungry. Maybe he was suspicious. But others weren't so lucky. Several guests fell violently ill. As was tradition, leftovers were handed out to beggars at the gate. Two of them, Bennet Kerwin and Alice Tripp, ate gratefully, then died in agony hours later. Vomiting, convulsions, cold sweats. They were found the next day, twisted in pain. The bishop survived. The rumor didn't. When news of the poisoning reached Henry VIII, his reaction was immediate and brutal. Bishop Fisher may have been one of the king's loudest critics, but this wasn't about politics anymore. To Henry, it was personal. If a bishop could be poisoned in his own home, what was stopping someone from doing the same to a king? Roose was quickly arrested while trying to flee London. He was taken to the Tower and tortured on the rack. His limbs were stretched until near breaking. Under pressure, he confessed. Yes, he had added the powder, but he still insisted he didn't know it was deadly. That didn't matter. On February 28th, just days after the incident, Henry appeared before Parliament in person, an extremely rare move. He declared the poisoning an act of treason, not just against Fisher, but against the Crown itself. Within days, Parliament passed a new law. Anyone guilty of poisoning would be executed by boiling. It was retroactive. It was made just for Roose. Richard Roose never saw a courtroom. There was no jury, no defense, no official verdict. Just a new law, pushed through by a furious king, and a date set for an execution no one would forget. By defining the act as high treason, Henry avoided the standard penalties, hanging, disembowelment, and quartering, brutal enough on their own. But Henry wanted something worse, slower. He wanted the punishment to match the method of the crime. A cook who used a pot to kill would die in one. The Boiling Law, Act for Poisoning 22. Henry VIII, Chapter 9, was unprecedented. It was created to send a message, not just to Rose, but to anyone who might dare to disrupt the fragile power structure of the Tudor court. In that moment, the line between justice and revenge disappeared. Smithfield was packed. Word had spread. This wasn't an ordinary execution. People climbed onto barrels and rooftops to get a better view. Vendors walked through the crowd selling pies and ale, as if this were theatre and not the final moments of a man's life. In the center of it all, the bronze cauldron boiled. When Richard Roose was brought out, some said he looked dazed, possibly drunk, sedated, maybe, as a small mercy. Guards stripped him, tied him, and lifted him above the water. A priest muttered a quick prayer. No one was really listening. Then they lowered him in. First, just his legs. His screams tore through the square. Skin blistered and peeled within seconds. Some in the crowd turned away. Some didn't. Then came the second dip, waist deep. The water, once clear, turned pink. Roose thrashed and gasped, his voice slipping from screams into something worse. The third time, they submerged him completely. Death took him, but not quickly, not kindly. Rose's death was horrifying, but was it justice or just theatre? Officially, he was punished for poisoning. But behind the scenes, questions lingered. Why had Henry taken such a personal interest in a lowly cook? Why change the law retroactively? And why so public? Some believed the king acted out of genuine fear. Poison was seen as a coward's weapon, silent, invisible, impossible to predict. Henry may have wanted to make an example of Rose simply to calm his own paranoia. Others weren't so sure. Rumors spread that the poisoning had been orchestrated by the Boleyn family themselves. Fisher was, after all, one of the biggest obstacles to Anne Boleyn becoming queen. If Roose was a pawn in a larger scheme, his execution may have served a second purpose, closing the case before fingers pointed higher. We'll never know the full truth. But in Tudor politics, appearances were everything, and silence, once enforced by fire and steel, was often permanent. Richard Roose wasn't the last person to die by boiling. The new law stayed on the books. In 1542, over a decade later, a woman named Margaret Davy was boiled alive for allegedly poisoning 3 households where she worked. Others followed. Each death was meant to reinforce the message. Poison was treason, and treason would be punished in the most terrifying way imaginable. The law was eventually repealed during the reign of Edward VI, Henry's son, as part of efforts to scale back the most barbaric punishments. But by then, the damage was done. John Fisher, the Bishop Rose supposedly tried to kill, didn't escape the storm either. 4 years later, in 1535, he was executed for refusing to recognize Henry as head of the Church of England. His head was placed on a spike above London Bridge, later replaced by that of Thomas More. Anne Boleyn, whose rise may have been indirectly tied to Rose's fate, was executed just a year after Fisher, beheaded on charges most historians now consider fabricated. The real poison in this story may not have been in the soup, but in the politics that surrounded it. Today, Smithfield is just another part of central London. Offices, cafes, commuters. No plaque, no marker. Nothing to suggest that nearly 500 years ago, a man was boiled alive in the middle of the square, watched by hundreds, maybe thousands. Most people walking through have no idea what happened beneath their feet. Rose's name is barely remembered. His crime, his punishment, even the law created just to kill him, all faded into history. But the story still lingers, in a quiet way, because it forces a question we don't always like to ask. How far will power go when it feels threatened? There's something unsettling, almost poetic about how Richard Roose died. He spent his life preparing food in boiling pots, feeding nobles and servants alike. In the end, he became the ingredient. Whether he was a fool, a pawn, or a killer, the punishment didn't fit the man. It fit the message. His death wasn't just about justice. It was about fear, control, and the power to rewrite the rules in real time. And that's what makes this story hard to forget. 5 centuries later, we like to think our systems are better, fairer, more humane. But stories like Rose's remind us how easily justice can twist when it's shaped by power, not principle. One law, one king, one cook in a boiling pot. Sometimes history doesn't leave a monument, just a warning.